An attempted cop killing. A drug house shootout. And a violent bank robbery. A gang of dangerous criminals threatens an entire community. The FBI and an undercover ex-cop put their lives on the line to track down the gunman.
In the late 1990s, one criminal terrorized an entire community. Witnesses refused to speak out. They knew the consequences could be deadly. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. As the violence escalated, the FBI worked with local law enforcement to launch a complex sting operation. Their mission? To lure this vicious fugitive out of hiding with the promise of a big score, and to get him off the streets for good.
Camden, New Jersey, located just across the river from Philadelphia. It is one of the poorest, most crime-ridden cities in America. On February 12, 1997, Officer Stephen Leone patrols the street. It's 4:20 a.m. Officer Leone stops to catch up on some paperwork.
I heard a massive amount of gunfire coming from the east side of Camden. Gunfire in excess of 50 rounds. Well, it's not unusual to hear gunfire in Camden, so it's a commonplace thing. And I try to locate a general area before I put out a call for assistance, so we didn't have cops running all over the place.
Officer Leone drives toward the area of the gunshots. The streets are deserted until a suspicious car appears. Officer Leone pulls in behind the car.
Then it appeared that the vehicle saw that I was a patrol vehicle, and they made a left-hand turn. I went down on the seat, and then I came up and I could taste my own blood.
Officer Leone has been hit in the face. Somehow he pulls himself out of his vehicle.
I bailed out of the car to take up a tactical position in the rear of my vehicle in case my assailants attempted to come back or they were still in the area. I knew I was hit. I knew I was hit with a bullet in the face and the head, and I didn't know how serious I was hurt. I radioed an officer down, officer shot, shots fired.
Officer down, officer needs assistance immediately. My location, shots fired.
Within minutes, Camden Police and rescue units respond to the scene.
Did you get a description of the vehicle?
Despite his wounds, Officer Leone gives them a description of the shooter's car. Paramedics try to stabilize him for transport to a nearby hospital. The officer has bullet fragments embedded in his face.
I took 3 in the scalp, 1 in my left eye socket, 1 in my right eye socket, and a little piece of my nose. I was lucky I didn't lose my vision.
Paramedics rush Officer Leone to the hospital, while investigators scour the scene looking for evidence. Camden County Prosecutor Lee Solomon.
The idea that somebody would be so brazen, so arrogant, to fire a weapon at a police officer is something that we mobilize against very quickly.
Investigators search the area, looking for the shooter's vehicle. Police are called to a house not far from the crime scene. A neighbor heard gunshots earlier that evening.
We got a call for shots being fired out here.
They notice the front door is riddled with bullet holes.
I hear something banging in the door.
According to the man, earlier that night, someone tried to break down his front door.
Coming in to get me.
The resident grabbed his gun. The intruders heard him moving in the house and opened fire. The resident returned fire, forcing the attackers to retreat. Police believe the attack was what they refer to as a ninja-style robbery, where masked gunmen invade a house to steal drugs or money. Over 50 rounds are fired into the house.
One of the bullets passed through a wall, a refrigerator, the rear wall of the residence, and the projectile was never found. Another went through a ceiling, floor ceiling, through the roof. Again, the projectile was never found. These were high-powered weapons, and so there was cause for concern.
Later that morning, a few blocks away, police discover an abandoned vehicle.
174.
The car matches Officer Leone's description of the vehicle used in the shootout.
There was broken glass, there was expended shells from the AR-15 and the .45 caliber pistol found in the car. And there was blood in the vehicle.
It was apparent to investigators that one of the perpetrators had been wounded. The officer runs the license plate. The car belongs to a woman who lives in the neighborhood. The canine unit picks up the scent from the car and tracks it to the same address listed on the vehicle registration.
And it was found 2 or 3 blocks from where I was, the location of my shooting was.
A SWAT team prepares to storm the house in case the shooters are still inside.
And there was an elementary school which they closed for the day because they thought there'd be a gun battle with these individuals that were heavily armed.
Inside the house, there is no sign of the gunman. Instead, the SWAT team finds a woman who police discover is the owner of the vehicle.
Who do you think you are? You're not allowed to be in my house. Shut up!
They learn that she is the girlfriend of Charlie Rodriguez, one of Camden's most violent criminals. Between 1984 and 1989, Charlie had been arrested for weapons and drug charges as well as making terrorist threats.
Crazy Charlie was known as a guy who would do anything. No violent act was beyond him. Crazy Charlie was the kind of guy that would shoot at a cop, would shoot at an old person, would shoot at a young person, would shoot indiscriminately.
SWAT finds no sign of the gunman. Police search the premises and question the girlfriend.
What's your
What
name?
are you doing in my house?
What's your name?
I don't have any.
She tells them she was at work at the time of the shooting and that she had reported her car stolen. Investigators search the house and find drops of blood. They call for forensics to collect the blood as
Submit
evidence.
evidence tech to collect some evidence, please. Have some blood on the scene.
Okay, we're doing a camera.
Investigators canvass the area, questioning the girlfriend's neighbors. They find someone who remembers seeing a few men leaving the girlfriend's house very early that morning. After looking through a photo lineup, he identifies one of the men. According to police records, the suspect is Jose Baez, on parole for manslaughter and weapons violations. Police track Baez to an apartment in Deptford, New Jersey. The dangerous ex-con is investigators' only link to a would-be cop killer. A violent rampage in Camden, New Jersey. results in the shooting of a police officer.
Shots fired off the down.
Evidence leads investigators to Jose Baez, an ex-con they believe was involved in the shooting. Baez is quickly taken into custody.
Turn around.
Investigators notice the suspect has a wound on one of his hands.
He recently sustained some type of bullet wound to his hand that he tried to sew up using thread himself.
Police arrest Baez for parole violations and take a sample of his blood for DNA testing. In the lab, Baez's blood is compared to evidence gathered in the Leone shooting.
And they were able to match the blood from him to the blood found on the scene, in the vehicle and at the house.
Investigators now have proof that Baez was in the car at the time Officer Leone was shot. But they don't have evidence to suggest that he actually pulled the trigger. At first, Baez refuses to talk to authorities. But after 2 weeks in custody, he asks to meet with the investigators.
Jose, you already been read your rights, so I have to go over that with you. I'm an investigator with Camden County, and I'm trying to figure out information about the shooting.
Baez finally agrees to talk, but only if police take steps to protect his family. He says that Charlie Rodriguez, Crazy Charlie, was involved in the ninja robbery as well as the Leone shooting.
I believe that Baez ultimately cooperated because Charlie had threatened his family. And out of fear that something might happen, he had cooperated.
The Camden County Prosecutor's Office obtains a warrant on Charlie Rodriguez for the attempted murder of a police officer. They also offer a $1,000 reward for information leading to his arrest. The state of New Jersey places Charlie Rodriguez on the top 10 list of wanted fugitives.
There was a manhunt every day. Every Camden cop and every cop in Camden County was looking for Charlie Rodriguez.
Although Charlie is well known throughout Camden, residents are too afraid to talk to police.
Fear is a powerful weapon for somebody like Charlie Rodriguez.
In the month following Officer Leone's shooting, police question their informants. All they learn is that Charlie is hiding somewhere across the river in Philadelphia. Since Charlie is believed to have fled to another state, local police turn to the FBI for help. FBI agent John Tam obtains a federal warrant and leads a multi-state hunt for Charlie Rodriguez.
I start by getting good photographs, reviewing his prior criminal records, and I also review prison records to see who their cellmates were, who visited them while they were in prison, and an attempt to identify people they might be in contact with.
FBI agents cast a wide net.
FBI.
But like local police, the FBI find that people are too terrified to talk.
Charlie Rodriguez's reputation was of a stone-cold killer. People were very cautious about talking about him.
Agents set up surveillance on Charlie's girlfriend, hoping she will lead them to Charlie.
Rodriguez had enough self-discipline to stay away from her and keep her away from him, so that wasn't helping us either.
Over the next few months, agents continue to question their informants and learn that Charlie is hiding in a tough Philadelphia slum known as the Badlands.
A very tough neighborhood, a lot of drug activity, difficult to police. People live there intimidated by the criminals. It's a hard place to find a fugitive because you get very little cooperation.
FBI SWAT teams raid buildings in the Badlands where Charlie is believed to be hiding.
We get the fugitive task force out over in Philadelphia, 5 in the morning, we'd hit the place, we'd catch somebody. They would be a criminal, but it wouldn't be Charlie Rodriguez. You know, we'd end up arresting somebody who was wanted for something else.
Let's go.
At the same time, on the crime-ridden streets of Camden, the FBI is running an unrelated drug investigation. And Special Agent Jim Walsh gets an unexpected tip.
We obtained information that Charlie Rodriguez and
his brother Joseph, and some other individuals were planning to commit a bank robbery or a robbery of an armored car in the near future.
Joseph Rodriguez, he had previously been convicted of murder in an infamous drug shooting that occurred in the early 90s, where 2 teenagers were killed on a drug corner in South Camden.
According to an informant, Charlie and Joey Rodriguez are targeting one bank in particular in the nearby town of Woodlyne, New Jersey. Agents set up surveillance teams. If the Rodriguez brothers hit the bank, local police are nearby ready to make the arrest. But weeks pass with no sign of the robbers.
Due to manpower needs, we couldn't sustain the surveillances, and after about a month and a half, we had to discontinue them.
On July 19, 1997, a few weeks after the FBI ends surveillance, several heavily armed men hit the Woodlyne Bank. One teller is too frightened to move. Two of the robbers forced the teller to empty the cash drawers. The remaining robber guards the lobby and calls out how much time has passed. One robber tries to force the supervisor to open the vault. She tells him she can't. The vault is on a timer. He tells her if she doesn't open the vault, he will kill her. In New Jersey, the shooting of a Camden police officer launches an FBI manhunt for a violent ex-con named Charlie Rodriguez. 5 months later, 3 men carrying semi-automatic weapons burst into a bank in Woodlyne, New Jersey. The bank supervisor can't open the vault. It's on a timer. One of the robbers threatens to kill her. The robbers are out of time. They have to leave before police arrive. The bank supervisor escapes with her life. FBI agents John Tam and Jim Walsh investigate the robbery. The customers and the bank employees are terrified. Special Agent Jim Walsh.
All the individuals were upset. One woman had to be taken to the hospital. She was so scared she suffered a minor heart attack.
Can you describe any one of them at all?
Because the violent nature of the bank robbery. I knew immediately that it was Charlie Rodriguez and his brother.
Agents and police watch the bridges to Pennsylvania and the New Jersey Turnpike for the Rodriguez brothers. They find no sign of them. At the FBI office in Cherry Hill, New Jersey, Agents Walsh and Tam study surveillance photos and footage from the bank's security cameras, looking for clues. Special Agent John Tam.
We got a good look at the weapons they were carrying, which were semi-automatic rifles, what is known as an AR-15. It's a very dangerous weapon because standard law enforcement body armor will not stop that round.
Although agents feel confident the robbers are Charlie and Joey Rodriguez, they cannot positively ID them from the surveillance.
You could not identify them in any way. They were fully clothed. They had gloves on, masks, hats.
Joey Rodriguez continues to live openly in Camden. The FBI doesn't have enough evidence to arrest him. Agents watch Joey, hoping he will lead them to Charlie.
He realized that he was the connection, if there was any, to his brother, and they stayed away from each other.
Over the next 7 months, The Camden, New Jersey area is plagued by a string of bank robberies. The Rodriguez brothers are possible suspects, but police have no hard evidence to link them to the crimes. Moorestown, New Jersey, a bedroom community north of Camden. May 23, 1998. More than a year after Officer Leone is shot, 3 men arrive at a Moorestown bank just before 8:30 a.m. They all carry assault rifles or machine pistols. The bank's doors are still locked. The robbers had lost precious time. They realize a bank employee has probably triggered the silent alarm. 2 of the robbers force tellers to empty the cash drawers. A 3rd gunman guards the lobby and calls out how much time has gone by. The robbers are tense. They decide the tellers are moving too slowly. The robbers frighten a late arriving teller. The getaway car won't start. The robbers panic. They threaten the teller, demanding her car keys. They escape in her car. Based on the robbers' MO, agents Tam and Walsh decide that it was probably the Rodriguez brothers.
Same builds.
Surveillance photos from the robbery provide even more clues. The weapons, masks, and even some of the clothing look identical to those used in the Woodlyne bank robbery.
The pictures prove that they were, in fact, similar type clothing worn.
But the 2 agents lack enough evidence to charge either Rodriguez brother with bank robbery. The gang's MO seems to be evolving. With each robbery, they are becoming more dangerous.
The violence of this group was escalating. Eventually, somebody was going to be killed. Either a bank employee, a customer, or a police officer responding to a report of a bank robbery. There's no question somebody was going to be killed.
Agents Tam and Walsh meet with the local law enforcement agencies in the cities and towns in the Camden, New Jersey area, advising them of the gang's MO. In late July 1998, Agent Tam gets an intriguing lead from Lieutenant Roy Whitmore at the Merchantville, New Jersey Police Department.
I know an individual who may be able to help us. I know a gentleman.
He said, I have an individual who grew up with Rodriguez and who knows his brother fairly well, who might be willing to locate Crazy Charlie Rodriguez.
A year and a half into the investigation, the FBI has the potential to develop an informant with access to information about Charlie Rodriguez.
It was the biggest break possible because we had been looking essentially in the blind for somebody to cooperate with us and give Charlie Rodriguez up. Lieutenant Whitmore arranged for me to meet this person and formulate a way to draw Charlie Rodriguez out from wherever he was hiding in Philadelphia.
The informant is a former police officer who was forced to resign due to a minor weapons infraction.
Well, I found him to be intelligent, surprisingly articulate, considering that he was from a very tough urban environment. And I felt him to be honest and reliable.
The ex-cop says he wants to stop Charlie before anyone else, especially a police officer, is shot or killed.
We talked about his relationship with Joseph Rodriguez.
The agents theorize that Joseph is somehow in contact with his brother so they can plan robberies.
I suggested maybe he could find out something from Joseph as to if he ever saw his brother, was in contact with him, how he contacted him, and the frequency of the contact, because maybe we could take advantage of that to locate Charlie Rodriguez.
Agents Tam and Walsh develop a plan to use their informant to lure Charlie out of hiding. They know that the ex-cop used to sell guns.
He had worked for a firearms dealer, and that was known on the street in South Camden.
But now the ex-cop is legally barred from owning or selling firearms. The agents decide to use the informant's background to help establish his cover.
He would go to Joseph Rodriguez and ask him if he was interested in buying a handgun. We felt this would be a good introduction that he wanted to now enter the criminal element.
I knew that that would interest Charlie Rodriguez because of his violent criminal nature. Criminals are always interested in acquiring new weapons. They can get rid of whatever weapon they've used before and move on to another one not connected with their prior crimes.
The ex-cop agrees to approach Joey at a family gathering a few days later. At first, Joey is wary.
Joseph knew that he had been a police officer and that he had been let go from the department, and he used this as an introduction. I was wrongly fired, they screwed me over, and heck with law enforcement.
Let's go join the party.
A few days later, Joey contacts the ex-cop and arranges a meeting.
He said, yeah, I talked to Charlie about it, and Charlie's interested in buying the handgun.
Not long at all. I'll call you.
So we knew we were making progress, and we knew that Charlie Rodriguez was nearby.
Agent Tam tells the undercover ex-cop that they need him to meet Charlie face to face.
Joseph Rodriguez would be very happy to buy the gun and then give it to Charlie Rodriguez, but that wouldn't help us.
It's no problem, but I'll take a look at it.
So I emphasized to him at that point that he was going to have to hand deliver the weapon to Charlie Rodriguez, where we could arrest him.
The FBI has no intention of actually delivering a working gun to either Rodriguez brother. The ex-cop goes to Joey's apartment to try to set up the sale.
The source was taking tremendous risks. He would have been killed immediately, in my opinion, if Charlie or Joey Rodriguez found out that he was cooperating with us.
Camden, New Jersey, 1998. An ex-cop embarks on a dangerous undercover operation for the FBI. Charlie Rodriguez, also known as Crazy Charlie, is suspected of shooting a police officer and robbing banks. The ex-cop attempts to infiltrate Charlie's crew by offering to sell him guns. The undercover informant meets with Charlie's brother. Joey Rodriguez, an ex-con who has served time for manslaughter, checks to see if he is wired.
He did not wear a recording device or anything because we were afraid if that was found, he would be immediately killed.
Slowly but surely, through a series of meetings, the ex-cop wins Joey's trust. The undercover informant tells FBI agents John Tam and Jim Walsh that Joey even asked him for advice on an upcoming robbery.
I said, that's a good idea. Tell them that you're interested in participating. And I thought maybe that would give us more information about where they were, where they might be meeting, and we could interrupt them before they really got the whole thing going.
The ex-cop adds that Charlie Rodriguez is looking for a big score this time, $100,000 or more.
I said, well, then we're going to suggest a crime for them to commit. They want to rob somebody, we're going to give them a target to rob.
Agents Walsh and Tam plan a sting operation to lure Charlie Rodriguez into the open without endangering the public.
The key thing is believability. The criminal has to believe the scenario. There's going to have to be money, there has to be opportunity, there has to be a plausibility that the crime can be committed. I suggested we would have them rob an armored car servicing an automatic teller machine on the New Jersey Turnpike, because this would give us an environment where we could seal off a rest stop where the ATM was located and catch them there.
Agents Tam and Walsh pick a location they feel will work well.
And we selected a rest stop located in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. The rest stop was located below the grade of the surrounding community. So if there was any gunfire or anything like that, the rounds would tend to be shot into a hill as opposed to flying all over the place.
The big thing for us was we felt that it was in a place that we could secure and control.
The undercover man pitches the robbery proposal to Joey, who carefully evaluates his every word.
He was able to go back to Joseph Rodriguez and say, I know this armored car driver who's willing to cooperate with us. And the armored car driver had significant sports betting debt, gambling debt, and that he wanted to be cut in on the proceeds of the robbery.
The undercover ex-cop says the armored car driver will be their inside man and hand over more than $200,000.
It may just come to that. So?
2 days later, Joey gets back to the ex-cop with an answer.
Joseph Rodriguez said, Charlie thinks it's a great idea. Let's go ahead with a plan and do this.
Joey says he wants to check out the rest area with a third person.
Who's that? A friend of mine.
The ex-cop is concerned by the sudden change in plans.
Joey says, don't worry about him. He's okay. You can trust him.
The newcomer's name is Jose Soto.
Soto had an extensive and violent criminal record. He'd also been convicted of second-degree murder and was out on parole. And they drove to the rest stop and basically checked it out to see if they would be able to pull off this robbery.
The rest area has a back service road. It will allow them to enter and leave the rest stop without ever going onto the turnpike.
They knew they could get away and probably not be seen by anybody. The robbers liked everything about the location. And the FBI liked everything about the location because it was going to allow us to isolate them in an area where they could not escape and where the public generally would be protected from any sort of firearms activity, any sort of gunshots or anything that might occur.
Joey drives around the rest stop, tracing the route the armored car will take as it approaches the ATM.
Joseph Rodriguez was familiar with the location and comfortable with it. So rather than having the cooperator have to sell it to Charlie Rodriguez, Joseph Rodriguez sold it to him for us.
The undercover informant tells the FBI that Charlie Rodriguez, the target of the sting, has approved the robbery for August 27th. With the plan now in motion, the FBI approaches the agency responsible for the turnpike and the rest area, the New Jersey State Police. Agent Tam briefs Lieutenant Colonel Robert Dunlop. Dunlop's troopers will shut down the entire area and the turnpike to protect the public.
We always have the news helicopters up in the air. Radio stations would have broadcasted that there was a backup on the turnpike. To make this thing work, we had to coordinate this where we would shut this rest area down just moments before our suspects arrived, so it wouldn't spook anyone.
SWAT teams will be positioned at the turnpike entrances and inside buildings in the rest area. 3 days before the sting, Tam and Walsh meet with FBI and police SWAT leaders to go over the plan to capture the Rodriguez brothers and Soto.
We knew they were going to be heavily armed, and we knew that, at least in the case of Charles Rodriguez, they had a propensity to shoot people when confronted.
The plan is to evacuate the rest area minutes before the Rodriguez gang arrives. The FBI's informant will park behind the rest area, but then walk to the front of the building to get out of the line of fire.
Yeah, we're just talking about right now what we're going to be doing.
The SWAT team will be hidden inside a delivery truck. For backup, snipers will be positioned on a rooftop.
A tow truck would come down the access road driven by an FBI agent, and he was planning on pinning the car with the Rodriguez brothers in it at that location where they could not pull the car out.
Once the gang is trapped, the SWAT team will make the arrest.
The plan was a good one in the sense that if they had a lick of sense, they would surrender.
August 27th, 1998. Agents and state police assemble at the rest area.
Check, roger that.
The trap is set.
5 in position. Check.
Crazy Charlie is considered a very dangerous and unpredictable criminal. I think everyone that was involved in this operation knew that there was a great possibility that he wouldn't go down easy. As much as we planned, there was always the possibility that he would want to shoot it out.
Camden, New Jersey. Charlie Rodriguez is suspected of wounding a police officer and robbing banks. August 27th, 1998. FBI agents John Tam and Jim Walsh have devised a complex sting operation to trap the dangerous fugitive and his crew. Nearly 100 agents and law enforcement officers are in position at a New Jersey rest stop. But Charlie and his crew fail to show.
We're wondering where we had gone wrong. Had they found out something about it? Do they now suspect the source?
The agents are concerned about their informant, an ex-cop who helped them infiltrate the Rodriguez crew. If Charlie Rodriguez knows he's been set up, he could kill the FBI informant.
Early that morning, I get a call from the cooperator. He tells me that the Rodriguez brothers, who were to meet him at his apartment in Merchantville, New Jersey, had not arrived.
We instructed the source to reach out for Joey Rodriguez and find out why they hadn't showed up.
Despite the danger, the FBI's undercover man agrees to talk to Joey.
Where were you yesterday?
Joey says that the day before, sheriffs came looking for one of the crew, Jose Soto.
We were this close.
The undercover man informs the FBI about the problem.
The county sheriff's department had a warrant for Jose Soto for failure to pay child support. So that had kind of spooked them, and they decided not to go forward with it.
Agent Walsh asks deputies to tell Soto that all they want from him is a promise to pay his child support.
That's right.
The Rodriguez brothers and Soto are relieved. The next day, Joey meets with the ex-cop near the Ben Franklin Bridge to tell him Charlie has chosen a new date for the robbery, September 1st. The FBI sting operation is back on. According to their insider, Charlie and the crew are now supposed to arrive at his apartment early in the morning of the robbery. All of them will drive to the rest stop together.
There was some consideration to arresting him at the apartment. However, the SWAT team leaders felt that it was not as safe an environment as the rest stop because there were other people living in the apartments above and on either side.
The apartment complex was next to a playground and an elementary school. The whole environment would be awful for a violent arrest. So we wanted to get them out of there.
It was agreed upon that we would go with the original plan and it would take place at the rest stop.
The morning of the robbery, the FBI's undercover man waits at his apartment for the crew to arrive.
Up to this point, Charlie Rodriguez had not showed up. The source had not yet seen or met Charlie Rodriguez during all this.
He finally gets to meet with Charlie face to face.
Charlie, it's good to finally see you.
Can I get something to eat?
What do you want?
Donuts.
Donuts.
The source has an opportunity to go outside to get orange juice and donuts to bring back to them.
He takes the opportunity to call Agent Tam. The robbery is going forward as planned.
Yeah, they're in the apartment. It's definitely a go.
At the apartment, the crew puts on bulletproof vests and checks their weapons. The FBI's inside man puts on a distinctive baseball cap.
We had him wearing a baseball cap that everybody would recognize so that they would know that he was the cooperator.
The robbers leave for the rest area in 2 stolen cars. FBI surveillance keeps agents informed of the robbers' location so they can evacuate the rest area before they arrive.
We shut down both the rest area and the turnpike within a 10 to 15 minute time period.
The undercover man parks one of the stolen cars in a nearby neighborhood to use as a getaway car after the robbery. He then drives the Rodriguez brothers and Soto down the back road toward the rest area. Already there, FBI agents prepare for the sting.
I knew this was going to be a very dangerous operation. The source was going to be put in danger, plus a lot of agents and law enforcement personnel.
My concern was that we not have anybody seriously injured or killed during this operation. We're just trying to arrest these people with the least amount of injury to anyone.
The FBI SWAT team waits inside a delivery truck.
We had FBI snipers on the rooftop of the rest stop in the event they got out of the car and tried to run away or fire at agents or anyone.
Nearly 100 law enforcement officers are hidden in and around the rest area.
Doesn't matter how many of these operations you've been on, there's always an adrenaline rush just prior to. What's going through my mind is that I hope we don't have gunfire. I hope no one's injured. I hope that we can take these people down without any serious problems.
The FBI's informant drives the crew along a back road into the rest area.
And the source parked exactly where he was told to park.
And our plan was to disable their vehicle by ramming it with a tow truck, which would probably knock the firearms out of their hands, and then they would be confronted by the SWAT team.
The FBI agent in the tow truck waits for the go-ahead signal, the undercover man leaving his car.
The main concern of this whole plan was getting the source out of the car, the safety of the source. And once he got out of the car, I felt everything would be fine.
But before the FBI source can get out of the car, Charlie senses that something is wrong. The informant's cover is in jeopardy of being blown. The wrong move now could cost him his life.
You want to ride in the trunk or you want to drive the car?
At a rest area in New Jersey, the FBI launches a sting operation to catch a gang of dangerous bank robbers. Gang leader Charlie Rodriguez senses a trap. He forces the driver of the car, an FBI cooperator, back into the car, preventing an FBI SWAT team from moving in. The undercover man is trapped. Agent Tam makes a difficult decision.
So I tell the SWAT team to go ahead and execute their secondary plan, which was the takedown. And that also involved the tow truck ramming the car.
The tow truck drives around to pin the robber's car.
As the tow truck approached, Charlie told the source, "Something's wrong here. This is a setup. Let's get out of here."
Needing to protect his identity, the FBI's undercover man speeds away from the SWAT team. One of the gunmen tries to shoot at the agents. The SWAT members open fire.
When the gunfire erupted, I think all of us in the back of our minds were saying, I hope we don't end up hitting our confidential source.
The tow truck slams into the rear end of the getaway car.
When it was finally over and we had these people safely in custody, I think everyone felt a tremendous amount of relief and satisfaction that it went down well.
Incredibly, the undercover man has not been wounded. FBI agents recover a huge arsenal of weapons from the Rodriguez brothers in Soto.
The amount of weapons and the amount of ammunition that was recovered from inside this car was something that I have never seen or heard of before. It's more firepower than would be necessary to rob 1,000 banks.
The weapons included an AR-15 converted to automatic, a machine pistol with a silencer, and an AK-47 Chinese clone also converted to automatic. Each of the gunmen also carried sidearms with the serial numbers drilled out, and dozens of fully loaded magazines. Altogether, they had well over 1,000 rounds of ammunition.
Charlie Rodriguez made a remark that if he had known what was going to happen, he would have brought his hand grenades. For them to actually have been arrested without anyone getting hurt with the kind of ammunition and the kind of weapons that they had in their person was an incredible feat.
The Rodriguez brothers were violent criminals. I mean, they'd killed before, they would kill again. And the only solution to that is to lock them up forever, which was the ultimately what happened here.
On March 30th, 2000, Jose Soto was sentenced in federal court to 37 years for the attempted armored car robbery and weapons violations. Charlie and Joey Rodriguez are sentenced to life without parole for 2 bank robberies, the attempted robbery of an armored car, and weapons violations. A man opens fire on rush hour traffic. A terrorist organization plots to overthrow the government. A member of law enforcement guns down an innocent woman. An armed bank robber strikes again and again. And a man abducts and kills a 17-year-old girl. As violent crime terrorizes the nation, the FBI must stop these criminals before they strike again.
In over 100 episodes of the FBI files, we've witnessed criminals not only terrorizing their victims with violence, but plaguing our society with fear. We look to both the experience and the courage of law enforcement to protect us and provide us with the hope that justice can and will prevail. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. In this special episode, we take a closer look at cases previously featured on this series. Our goal is to explore more fully some of the investigative methods and techniques that have made the Federal Bureau of Investigation the premier law enforcement agency in the world.
FBI Director Robert S. Mueller.
The FBI was originally established to address crime that covered cities, counties, and spread across state lines. The country needed a federal law enforcement entity to do those investigations. And over the years, as the country has grown and as the world, by the same token, has grown smaller, the FBI's mission has changed to meet the various threats.
October 1995. The Shaw family finds itself in the middle of a nightmare. 3 masked gunmen have broken into their South Carolina home. 2 hold several family members hostage, while the leader forces Amy Shaw to let him into the vault at the bank where she works as a teller. He gets away with $80,000, allowing Amy to remain unharmed. Before leaving, he calls his accomplices to tell them the job is done and that they should flee. Once their captors are gone, the Shaws call the police. Patrolling the neighborhood, police find 2 young men who they eventually take into custody. Since the gunmen were masked during the crime and left no fingerprints, police cannot tie these men to the scene. The 2 suspects give statements to the local police in which they deny taking part in the crime, but authorities doubt they are being truthful. FBI agents know they must try to get a confession. They will use interrogation techniques which require special training. Executive Assistant Director for Law Enforcement Services, Grant Ashley.
We graduate from a training school knowing a lot, but the real education starts when you get out and start working cases. That's when you learn about people, you learn to ask questions a certain way, and whether the answer is truthful or not.
Special Agent Jerry Jones chooses a suspect and begins the interrogation. Like most agents, he starts by interviewing the suspect about matters that do not pertain to the case at hand. This helps him to choose an appropriate interrogation strategy.
It just becomes instinct. While talking to these people, you are able to develop a concept of what their greatest fear is, some weakness they may have in their past or their family or something of that sort. And in this particular case, it was fear of the death penalty.
Knowing that the suspect is unaware that the teller Amy Shaw is now safe, Agent Jones sees his opportunity and decides to exploit it.
And what I told him was that my main concern was the safety and well-being of the victim teller.
I want her back alive. If your friend kills her,
had the 3rd robber killed her,
you're going to the electric chair.
They would both have faced the death penalty.
Jones knows that his choice to use this common technique must be measured. It could backfire. It may strengthen the suspect's resolve not to speak at all.
How about coming out and tell me the truth?
But the agent's plan works. Faced with the prospect of his worst fear coming true, the suspect admits his involvement in the crime and names the lead gunman, Christopher Jaburk. Police quickly arrest Jaburk at his mother's house just over the state line in Georgia. He is convicted on all charges. But Jaburk's crime spree has just begun. Before he can be sentenced, he escapes from jail with a bank robber named Jerome Frierson Bay. Authorities immediately lock down the area. Despite a massive manhunt, they find no sign of the 2 escapees. Agent Jones knows that when tracking a fugitive, personal information provides important clues as to where the fugitive may go or what he may do next. During several interviews prior to trial, Jones senses a special bond in Jaburk's life, giving him an idea.
It became evident to me the only real thing in the world that he cared about was his mother. I was convinced that at some point in time, he would come back to the mother. We established 24-hour surveillance.
But Jaburk doesn't show. Agents track numerous bank robberies committed by the two fugitives as they move up the East Coast. In New Jersey, authorities finally locate and apprehend Frierson Bay. Agents are disappointed Jaburk is no longer with them. But Agent Jones has a hunch.
I always believed that Jaburk would come back home.
The fugitive is located in Atlanta, staying under a false name. Jaburk is arrested without incident, returned to jail, and later sentenced to life in prison.
Over the years, you just develop an expertise where you can sense things about a person and his family relationships and things like that.
Agent Jones' individual instinct and experience were critical to bringing this case to a close. Sometimes it takes the efforts of an entire team to bring criminals to justice. Seattle, 1992. A gun-wielding man commits a string of daring bank robberies, threatening to kill anyone who gets in his way. Agents named the thief Hollywood for his use of theatrical makeup and disguises in his heists. Over the next 3 years, the gunman robs 12 banks, taking nearly $1 million and leaving behind few clues. To take down this elusive criminal, the Seattle Police and the FBI must join several other law enforcement agencies in a unique investigative environment known as a task force. Executive Assistant Director Grant Ashley.
We bring together the resources of our state and local partners with the FBI and some of our federal partners so that we can get the unique skills and abilities of these agencies focused on a particular threat to get the maximum results.
But local law enforcement and federal agents do not always see eye to eye. FBI officials named Special Agent Ellen Glasser as the supervisor of the Puget Sound Task Force.
We had about a dozen different agencies, all of whom came with different missions, different intentions, and it was very interesting because we have different philosophies of how we do things, we have different policies, so it was very challenging to have everybody work together for the common good.
Seattle Police Detective Mike Megan is also a member of the task force.
I looked at it myself as being a guest in the FBI's house. You know, there was a lot of respect given to them, but there was hurdles to be broken down, you know, the preformed opinions or judging a book by its cover. We had to put things aside, such as egos and attitudes, and who is going to always take the lead, and who is going to be the point man, and you know, are the officers going to play second fiddle? And we had to come to an understanding.
The task force cannot expect to accomplish their mission if they cannot work as a team.
We had to work on communications between task force members every day. They were very strong-willed people that were on the task force. And my philosophy has always been that if you put relationships first and work on relationships with people, working together, then the mission will take care of itself.
With this philosophy, Glasser brings cohesion to the group. The task force is now working as one. Together, they determine the pattern and frequency of Hollywood's crimes, so they will be prepared to react quickly the next time he strikes. The effort pays off. On November 27, 1996, Hollywood is the prime suspect in an armed bank robbery. Through the combined efforts of the task force, police locate and corner him in a camper. Tragically, he ends his own life with a single shot to the head.
Even though people brought different experiences and different expertise to the task force, they were all able to blend and work extremely effectively together.
FBI field agents often receive the glory for solving cases. But the highly skilled technicians at the FBI crime lab in Quantico, Virginia, deserve much of the credit. They are more than scientists in lab coats. They are creative detectives whose tireless work will often decide whether or not a case is resolved. Dr. Dwight Adams is the assistant director in charge of the lab.
I knew I wanted to be a part of the FBI laboratory because it is a world-class facility. And you can look in the eyes of any individual in this building and you will see people who are very dedicated to performing at the very highest levels. And our only interest is in providing the truth, providing the most accurate, reliable, and unassailable results that we can.
January 11th, 1982. California Highway Patrol Officer George Gwaltney calls in a possible suicide off Interstate 15 near Barstow. When backup officers arrive, they find 23-year-old Robin Bishop dead from a single gunshot wound to the head. Police cannot find a gun at the scene, but they do find handcuff marks on the young woman's wrists. Clearly, this was no suicide. This was murder. In 1982, California Highway Patrol Officer George Gwaltney reports the discovery of a suicide victim on the side of the road. But since the victim was shot in the back of the head, investigators on the scene conclude that it was murder. The victim's driver's license and registration are visible, as if they had been taken out for some reason. To rule out the possibility that a police officer killed the young woman, the lead investigator orders all area officers to hand in their service weapons for ballistics comparisons. One officer fails to do so, George Gwaltney, who insists his gun has been stolen. Gwaltney becomes a suspect when investigators find the dismantled frame of his police-issued .357 in his truck. Someone has removed the barrel, the one piece that through ballistics testing can forensically tie the gun to the bullet that killed Robin Bishop. Police also find a box of ammunition in Gwaltney's bedroom closet. It is the same brand of bullet that killed Robin. In late 1982, the state of California charges George Gwaltney with murder, but a deadlocked jury results in a mistrial. A second trial in Superior Court also ends in deadlock. Investigators are convinced Gwaltney is guilty, but they can no longer charge him at the state level. They look to federal authorities for help. Special Agent Michael Randolph reviews the case and recognizes that Gwaltney is so cunning, prosecuting him will be difficult, if not impossible. Getting a conviction will take extraordinary tenacity from both the agents in the field and from the specialized examiners at the FBI's crime lab. Executive Assistant Director Grant Ashley.
Technology has been a great tool, but what still is the most important aspect for the FBI is the human side.
FBI examiner Jim Cadigan from the lab's Firearms and Tool Marks Unit tries to find a link between the evidence and the suspect. Normally, he would compare the striations in the murder weapon's barrel to those on the fatal bullet, but the barrel is missing. Cadigan will need to think outside the box to find another way to the truth. He knows that investigators had confiscated vice grips and wrenches when they found the revolver's frame.
The question was, could one of these tools have been used to hold the frame while the barrel of the firearm was being removed?
Cadigan decides to use a technique known as tool mark analysis. He notices a small impression on the gun frame, then checks each of Gwaltney's tools until he finds a pipe wrench with a broken tooth.
And that looked very similar to the mark that was on the frame. So using that as a pivot point, I started making impressions with that tool, and comparing those impressions under a microscope, I was able to come to the conclusion that that particular tool was used to the exclusion of any other tool to make the marks that were found on the frame.
Although this points to Gwaltney as having removed the barrel of his gun, it is not enough to prove he killed Robin Bishop. Investigators will have a case if they can find a link between the fatal bullet and the box of ammunition from Gwaltney's closet. In an unprecedented move, the lab decides to employ a new technique they've been developing, which matches the molecular content of the bullets. FBI Special Agent Michael Randolph.
When a manufacturer of lead like Remington Arms makes a batch of lead, they throw things in much as you would when you're making meatloaf. That makes each batch of lead unique.
In the FBI's very first nuclear ballistics examination, scientists place a fragment of one of Gwaltney's bullets in a nuclear reactor, where it absorbs neutrons and becomes radioactive. When measured, the radioactivity reveals the precise amount of each element in the lead, an atomic fingerprint. Examiners then repeat the process with a piece of the fatal bullet.
And lo and behold, we find approximately 27 rounds that are the exact match as the lead taken from the head of our victim.
In January of 1984, George Gwaltney goes on trial, this time in federal court. Gwaltney is found guilty and sentenced to 90 years in prison. 12 years later, George Gwaltney died in prison of a heart attack. Executive Assistant Director for Law Enforcement Services, Grant Ashley.
There's the unsung heroes that you never hear of, the people sitting back in the laboratory that make sense of this. This takes an awful lot of time, and it takes extraordinarily talented, patient people.
Proving a case using hard scientific evidence is an essential tool of every law enforcement agency. But when authorities have no clear suspects and very little physical evidence, the FBI must rely on one of their most unique and least understood disciplines, profiling. May 31st, 1985. On a lonely road in Lexington, South Carolina, 17-year-old Sherry Faye Smith checks her mailbox before disappearing without a trace.
Sherry!
2 days of fruitless searching leads investigators to conclude that she has been abducted. Early the next morning, their fears are realized when the missing girl's family receives a call from the kidnapper. He explains they will eventually get their daughter back and tells them that they will receive a letter later that day. When the letter finally arrives, the family is horrified. Written in Sherry's handwriting, the document is entitled Last Will and Testament. In South Carolina, a young woman has been abducted. Her life is on the line, and investigators have no idea who the suspect is. In an effort to identify what sort of man would have kidnapped Sherry Faye, investigators call upon FBI profilers at the Investigative Support Unit in Quantico, Virginia. Profilers are veteran agents who receive specialized training in criminology and applied psychology. Retired FBI Special Agent John Douglas advanced the art of behavioral profiling for the FBI. For over a decade, he and others conducted interviews with convicted killers, arsonists, rapists, and kidnappers in various prisons around the country.
I tapped through that memory of theirs that no one has ever tapped into before when they were perpetrating the crime. It takes time, but once I'm in there, I get tremendous information.
Douglas and others cataloged and categorized their findings, creating a statistical database from which profilers can draw inferences about criminals based on patterns of behavior.
I'm very much like a doctor in medicine, where I'm trying to come up with a diagnosis, and I'm going to rely on the thousands of cases that I've worked. I'm going to rely on the hundreds and hundreds of interviews of offenders who committed similar types of crimes.
When creating a profile, Douglas needs to review all investigative materials, including preliminary police reports and crime scene photographs.
You really need to have all the information relative to the victim. You have to do an analysis, a profile of the victim. You ask yourself the question, why was this victim the victim of this crime? And then you look at the way the crime was perpetrated, the low-risk crime or high-risk crime. When someone asks for a profile, what they're looking for are physical and behavioral characteristics, which includes age, race, sometimes body typing, educational level, occupational type. Sometimes it may include right down to the type of vehicle the person will be driving, may include the overall behavior of the subject, whether or not he's very, very rigid, obsessive compulsive on one extreme, to being very, very sloppy and careless on the other. And so it can include sometimes as many as 100 characteristics in the overall profile.
At the request of South Carolina authorities, Douglas turns his attention to the Sherry Faye Smith case and reviews all the case materials.
What made the case unique was that we have a subject who's communicating with the family, which is very, very rare, very, very unusual. I felt good about it because when you have a communique, whether it's a written communique or a verbal communique, you can do an analysis of that, and it begins to paint a pretty nice picture of the type of person we should be looking for. It was as if he followed a script that was written out beforehand. Here is someone who will be very, very rigid, very, very orderly, very, very tight.
After scrutinizing every detail of the abduction, Douglas generates a 22-point profile. The subject is likely a male with a prior criminal record and lives locally.
The nature of the criminal beast is that they will perpetrate crimes and they will, as well as dispose of crimes in areas where there's some type of familiarity.
Douglas also believes the abductor has feelings of inadequacy and compensates for that through violent actions.
He feels like nothing. He feels like a nobody. And how can this nobody, this personality, this person who's probably overweight, low self-esteem, unattractive, how can he become a somebody? He'll go after victims that there was no chance that he would ever come in contact with someone like a Sherry Faye Smith. And so for the first time in their life, they can be powerful.
2 days after the kidnapper's last communication, he calls the family with specific directions to where they can find their daughter.
Listen carefully. Take Highway 378 west to traffic circle. Turn left at white frame building. Go to backyard. 6 feet beyond, we're waiting. God chose us.
Investigators race to the location, hoping to find the young girl alive. When they arrive, their worst fears are confirmed. Sherry Faye Smith is dead. The body, having been exposed to the extreme heat and elements for several days, is so decomposed it makes determining the exact cause and time of death impossible. To the profiler, the detailed directions to Sherry's body, as well as the condition of the crime scene, provides further insight into the suspect's mind.
It told me that he had been out to that crime scene on several different occasions because he was very specific as to the number of miles and tenths of miles and number of feet where she can be found. It also told me that he had some criminal sophistication because I believe what he did is he waited for her to go into advanced stages of decomposition, which would make it more difficult for law enforcement to determine cause and method of death.
On the evening of Sherry's funeral, the killer calls again and asks to speak to her sister, Dawn.
Hello? This thing got out of hand, and all I wanted to do was make love to Dawn. I've been watching her for a couple of weeks.
To who?
In a chilling moment, the killer uses Dawn's name in place of Sherry's. Investigators brace themselves for the possibility that this killer may be turning his murderous obsession towards Dawn. South Carolina investigators are searching for the man who murdered 17-year-old Sherry Faye Smith. FBI profiler John Douglas assists the investigation by providing a profile of the suspect. After 2 weeks spent underground, the killer resurfaces. In a bold move, he snatches 9-year-old Deborah May Helmet from her front yard in plain view of another child. For profiler John Douglas, the killer's shift to a riskier crime is a sign that he is under duress.
The crime does not reflect distress at that time. However, what happens when you start putting it together from experience of other cases, i.e. the Ted Bundy case, kills women at the Chi Omega house, and then he goes after a young child. He's totally starting to break down under the stress of being under the scrutiny of law enforcement trying to hunt him down.
After kidnapping Sherry Faye Smith, the killer had repeatedly called the family. But this time, he remained silent. Douglas must devise a plan to draw him out. He knows that killers will often follow their crimes in the media. So he decides to organize a memorial service that he knows will be reported in the newspapers. He hopes this will rekindle the killer's fascination with Sherry Faye's sister, Dawn. The kidnapper takes the bait and makes a call to Dawn.
You can't be protected all the time. Okay, God wants you to join Sherry Faye. It's just a matter of time.
Then, before hanging up, the killer gives Dawn a series of directions.
Okay, listen carefully. Go 1 north, turn right. Deborah May is waiting. God forgive us all.
Investigators follow the directions. There, they find the body of 9-year-old Deborah May Helmick. Douglas suspects the killer will likely try to abduct Dawn. Meanwhile, forensic scientists use a process known as electrostatic detection to read invisible indentations on Sherry Faye's last will and testament. The information leads investigators to a suspect, Larry Gene Bell, a local blue-collar worker. Police interview people who know Bell. In learning about him, investigators find that he matches Douglas's profile exactly. Authorities arrest Bell. Forensic evidence and Douglas's profile help convict Bell of both murders. He is executed on October 4th, 1996. In this case, Douglas was instrumental in identifying an unknown killer. Profilers can also confirm suspicions about known suspects. In 1983, Alaska state troopers are investigating the state's first serial killer. Dozens of women, mostly exotic dancers and prostitutes, have disappeared. Many are never seen again, but some turn up in shallow graves with .223 caliber shell casings nearby. The state troopers have a suspect, a local family man, Robert Hansen. A year earlier, a prostitute had told the local Anchorage police that she had been abducted and tortured by Hansen before she was able to escape. Anchorage police officers interviewed Hansen's friends, confirming his alibi. They searched his house and car, but found no evidence and suspended the investigation. Investigators felt that Hansen, who owns a local bakery, was too unlikely a suspect. But when the state troopers learn of the prostitute's report, they believe he may be the serial killer they are searching for. Investigators contact FBI Special Agent John Douglas for help.
And this wasn't really to do a profile. Here they have a suspect, so what you do is you do a personality assessment of this individual and some of the circumstances around him to see whether or not this person has the capability, the capacity, the propensity for violence.
The fact that the killer had murdered so many meant to Douglas that he has the means to function unnoticed in the community, someone who works independently. Since the bodies were recovered in remote areas of wilderness, the killer could possibly be an avid outdoorsman. Hansen fits the profile. He is both a small business owner and a recreational hunter. Since he preyed on prostitutes and exotic dancers, Douglas concludes the killer would have low self-esteem and had probably grown up feeling like an outcast.
Hansen was unattractive. His face was all pockmarked, had a speech impediment, which probably caused him lot of problems as a kid growing up.
After reviewing all the case materials, Douglas concludes that Hansen was indeed capable of murder. If investigators are to prove Hansen's guilt, they'll need physical evidence. To obtain a search warrant for Hansen's home, they'll have to convince a judge of what they will find there.
You want us to ask a question first?
The profiler's role now switches from confirming suspicions about a suspect to helping investigators develop a search warrant. Authorities know they need to look for the gun that left the .223 caliber shell casings found near the bodies. They ask Douglas if there is anything else to list in the warrant.
We're dealing here with a serial killer. It starts off as fantasy. And one of the things to keep the fantasy going after the crime is they take some type of a memento. We call them either souvenirs or trophies, something belonging to the victims. It doesn't have to be anything expensive. It could be a cheap watch or costume jewelry. And what they'll do is that they'll keep this. They're not going to keep this out in open view. They're going to secrete this in places within the house, under a crawl space if they have it, or up in the attic under insulation.
Douglas helps prosecutors write the affidavit, which swells to 48 pages. A judge approves the warrant. During the search of Hansen's house, investigators find the trophies Douglas suggested would be there, including the business cards of some of the victims. They also find several weapons. Among them is a .223 Ruger rifle. Ballistics testing proves it is the gun that fired the shells found near several of the crime scenes. Confronted with all the evidence, Hansen finally breaks. He confesses to murdering 4 women and is sentenced to 461 years with no chance of parole. While a profiler provides a psychological picture of a criminal, agents in the field use their instincts, experience, and deductive reasoning to get inside the mind of a suspect to uncover motive. On the morning of January 25th, 1993, a lone gunman opens fire in front of CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia, killing 2 CIA employees and injuring several others. In 1993, a gunman unleashes his fury with an AK-47 outside CIA headquarters, killing 2 and wounding others in a hail of gunfire. FBI Special Agent Brad Garrett arrives on the scene and attempts to piece together a motive for the attack.
The first thing you do when you walk into a crime scene is, what's the obvious? Well, the obvious is this appears to be directed towards the CIA. It might be directed towards the individuals that were shot. But it was clearly somebody wanted to make a public statement during a rush hour traffic. So that sort of gives you a shell at least to start from. In any case you investigate, you always look for a link between the victim and the subject, because if you have a link, it tends to make it a lot easier in solving the case versus strangers who commit crimes against other individuals. But once we started looking at the backgrounds of the individuals that were shot, and we looked at the circumstances as to why they were at that intersection, it didn't appear, at least to me, that there probably was a link between those particular individuals being shot and the person that shot them. So we immediately started looking at who within the CIA, in other words, disgruntled employees, present employees, that may have had a relationship with these people that could have retaliated for whatever reason. But after spending some time doing that, there was really nothing in there that jumped at us either. So I said, where do we go from here? Well, you start looking at the logical things. You have a description of an individual who did this shooting. Brought an assault rifle up to shoulder and started shooting down range. And so you're looking for somebody that appears to have a real issue with the CIA.
By cross-referencing the killer's physical description with a database of recent purchases of AK-47s, investigators identify a suspect. He is 28-year-old Mir Amal Kanzi, a Pakistani immigrant. Garrett's initial assessment of motive is confirmed during interviews with people who know Kanzi, including his roommate. They revealed that he was becoming enraged by U.S. foreign policy and was planning something sinister against the CIA, White House, or the Israeli embassy. Unfortunately, Kanzi has fled to either Pakistan or Afghanistan. To bring the fugitive back to the United States for trial, Garrett must utilize what is arguably an agent's most important skill: his ability to anticipate obstacles and to devise ways around them. After 4.5 years of pursuit, Agent Garrett receives information that Kanzi is hiding in a Pakistani hotel. But when they apprehend him, there is a problem.
One of the fears I had when we went in the room and looked at him is that he didn't look like his picture. He gained weight, he had a beard, and so I looked at the other 3 agents and I said, you know, I'm not sure if this is the right guy.
Agent Garrett must be absolutely positive. Without properly identifying the suspect, he cannot bring him back to the United States.
I did not want to leave that room without being convinced in my own mind that the individual that was handcuffed on the bed was, in fact, Mir Amal Kanzi.
The only way for Agent Garrett to make a positive ID is through fingerprint analysis. Typically the job of highly skilled lab specialists who are thousands of miles away in Washington. Fortunately, Agent Garrett had thought ahead.
I went to FBI headquarters to the latent fingerprint section and worked with one of the experienced latent fingerprint examiners who actually took the 10 fingerprints of Mr. Kanzi. Then we actually studied them over several days and learned all the unique characteristics so that I would be able to identify him by fingerprints once we found him.
Beautiful world.
Now Garrett must put that training to use.
He was handcuffed, face down on the bed, and I took a fingerprint ink pad and hit his thumb with the ink. Then I took a white piece of paper and then hit his thumb onto the white piece of paper, so then I hit his thumbprint. I got on the floor of the hotel with a flashlight, a magnifying glass, and his prints.
It's a match. Thanks to Agent Garrett's foresight, he can now bring a suspected terrorist back to the United States for prosecution. Mir Amal Kanzi is found guilty of murder, malicious shooting, and using a firearm in the commission of a felony. He is sentenced to death and is executed in 2002. Special Agent Brad Garrett's unique training and experience helped him close this case. But sometimes an agent's greatest asset is his ability to adapt to new situations and think on his feet. Executive Assistant Director Grant Ashley.
These are people that want to win. They aren't here just to get a paycheck.
1985. In the hills of Arkansas, an army of extremists plot to overthrow the U.S. government. They spread a doctrine of hate, murder, and genocide, launching death raids on churches and synagogues. Federal agents must dismantle this heavily armed militia without igniting a bloody war. The FBI follows a trail to the compound of the Covenant, the Sword, and the Arm of the Lord, or CSA, a violent group of white supremacists. The compound is heavily fortified, and the men inside are armed with grenades, dozens of automatic weapons, and even a powerful anti-tank rocket. Investigators need to serve arrest and search warrants. But unlike most circumstances where a SWAT team would be utilized, this situation is more delicate. Reports confirm that innocent women and children are inside the compound. With hundreds of lives in the balance, there can be no margin for error. Authorities working the case do not have the expertise or manpower to take on the CSA. And the U.S. Constitution bars the military from aiding in a civil investigation. The FBI decides to send a highly trained tactical group called the Hostage Rescue Team, or HRT, the Bureau's equivalent of the Army's Delta Force. The HRT acts as a counterterrorism unit within the borders of the United States. In 1985, Special Agent Danny Colson is the commander of the HRT.
The HRT basically are assaulters. It's their job to go into a crisis point and neutralize terrorists and rescue hostages. But this was not that type of situation. These people were very well armed. They were very formidable. And we wanted to avoid a shootout.
To serve the arrest and search warrants safely, Colson needs to adapt to the circumstances. With their traditional method of attack out of the question, they devise a different approach.
The very reputation of the FBI was dependent upon this case, and we believe that without any doubt the best way to do this was to surreptitiously set a perimeter, which would be very dangerous and difficult, but certainly less dangerous and difficult than doing an assault on that compound.
During the first phase of the operation, reconnaissance teams penetrate the compound's perimeter in the dead of night. Using handheld and airplane-based sensors, they avoid roaming CSA patrols. After 10 days of scouting, an HRT sniper team reports a CSA patrol is about to unwittingly stumble across their position. As team leader, Colson must make a split-second decision that could affect the lives of hundreds of people. In 1985, the FBI is closing in on the CSA, a right-wing paramilitary organization based in Arkansas. Over 200 agents secretly surround their compound. FBI snipers report a CSA patrol is about to discover them. FBI hostage rescue team leader Danny Colson must act quickly. He knows if he makes the wrong move, a bloody war could ensue. His decision is surprisingly bold.
I said, you hail them, you yell at them and tell them you're the FBI and tell them to go back inside. And everybody kind of looked at me like, ooh, why don't we grab these two guys? And I didn't want to do that.
Colson's tactic is calculated for maximum effectiveness.
I wanted to scare the daylights out of these guys. But I also wanted them to understand that if I gave them an order, they had to follow it. I wanted them to get in the habit of following my orders or the orders of my team. And secondly, to show them that we weren't there to hurt them.
The sniper alerts the roaming patrol and orders them back inside. They comply, but now the CSA knows the FBI is outside their compound. The standoff begins. Now someone must negotiate the surrender of the CSA's leader.
Well, the HRT doesn't have a negotiating element, but they work very closely with the behavioral science group at Quantico.
The FBI tries to determine the most effective way to deal with the CSA leader, who they suspect will be unwilling to speak with a negotiator.
He would only talk to the HRT commander. It would be commander to commander or general to general. The FBI's policy on negotiations has always been that leaders never negotiate. The leader of the HRT, a non-scene commander, never, ever, ever negotiates. To have the leader negotiates takes away some of your techniques. You can't stall for time. You can't play good guy and bad guy between the negotiator and the commander.
Nevertheless, the FBI decides they want Colson to take on the role of negotiator, since that is their only option.
I wasn't comfortable with that. I'm a tactical person. I had been a sniper and I'd been a SWAT team member and a SWAT team leader and trained as an operator. And I was not trained to be a negotiator. And I didn't know that I could pull that off. I'd much more comfortable going in after the guy than trying to talk him out. But they were adamant that it had to be done like that.
Through his experience in observing negotiations and some quick on-site training, Colson is able to adapt to his new position. The CSA leader makes first contact when he calls the FBI's command post and speaks with Agent Colson.
We talked on the phone for a few minutes about things we wanted to do. He offered to me that he'd be allowed to come out because he wanted to personally talk to me and see me, but he also be allowed to go back in, which I agreed to, which was total departure from FBI policy. And we made a quick contact with FBI headquarters because I was getting ready to violate FBI policy by having a badly wanted fugitive, a terrorist, in my hands, essentially, and then let him leave. And went up then went to the assistant director of the criminal division. In a word, he approved it, said, yes, do it.
After a series of face-to-face meetings, the CSA leader emerges from the compound. He tells Colson that while he and many of his followers are ready to surrender, there are those who wish to fight, and he cannot control them.
And he said to me, I need help. He said, there's a man that's our spiritual leader, and I need his advice, and I need his help to convince people that's the thing to do, come out. And I said, who is this? He said, it's Robert Millar. This, again, is something totally against FBI policy, to bring in a Confederate into a crisis situation, not just to negotiate, but to go inside. That's never been done in the history of the FBI. They'd never allowed that to happen, to allow a third-party individual who was sympathetic to the people we were dealing with to go inside to be a part of the negotiation whether or not they came out. This is a huge risk, and I thought it was worth taking.
Colson gets approval to allow Mr. Millar to negotiate with CSA members.
Nice to see you again.
He remains inside the compound for nearly 24 hours. The next morning, day 4 of the siege, Millar and the CSA leadership finally emerge.
They came out and they said, we have an agreement that we will surrender. We will come out and we'll give up our arms and walk out peacefully.
As commander of HRT, Colson receives the news with guarded optimism.
You're constantly thinking about the worst case scenario. Even good things have to be looked at with some suspicion. Was it a diversion to get out the backside and start a firefight? So we had to be very careful.
Colson gives the leader 15 minutes to gather his people and bring them out.
And very shortly after, I get a communication from a sniper team that they're coming. They're coming out. The snipers report that they're in civilian attire. There's no camis, there's no battle gear, there's no weapons they can see.
Miraculously, the HRT accomplishes its mission without a single shot fired.
It was an ending that we had all prayed for, and one that we were very fortunate that we had.
If not for Agent Colson's quick thinking and ability to adapt in tense situations, the standoff would likely have had a much bloodier conclusion.
It shows what the FBI can do in a major crisis situation. It shows the number of different disciplines it has at its disposal, how they can bring unlimited resources on the focus of a problem. It's a great big machine. It grinds you up if you're a bad guy, and it's what happened here. This wasn't an HRT story. It's an FBI story.
We have seen just a few of the many ways in which the FBI works to solve cases. With each new investigative challenge they face, we can rest assured that the Bureau will dedicate itself to doing whatever it takes to protect the American public.